Hello and welcome to Vantage Israel edition. The war continues here, and so do the sirens and rocket strikes. And I must tell you, it's pretty unsettling when those sirens go off. It's your signal to take cover. Here in the cities, that often means bomb shelters. Most houses and establishments have a bomb shelter in Israel, a sort of underground bunker. Today, we visited this vast network. Stay tuned for that ground report. In Gaza, though, there is no such cover. Israeli strikes continue to pound Hamas targets. Medical supplies are running low. We're also hearing that Gaza's only power plant has shut down, so no electricity. The people of Gaza say there is nowhere to go for them. Meanwhile, a new threat is emerging to the north. Hezbollah is striking Israeli positions. Shots were also fired from Syria. Could this be the start of a multi-front war then? We'll discuss on the show tonight. While Israel's allies are rallying behind them, in some corners of the world there is support for Hamas. Apparently, brutal terrorism is not enough to sway these people. We will tell you who these people are and what drives their politics. Let's get started. It's day 5 of the Israel-Hamas war, and status report, a lot more escalation. That is the big headline. A lot of escalation. The death toll is now increasing rapidly. It was around 1,600 yesterday. It is now more than 2,100. 2,100 people dead. Israel has put its death toll at more than 1,200. Over in Gaza, it's more than 900. And chances are this will keep increasing. This morning, Gaza woke up to more airstrikes. The Israeli Air Force struck 200 targets in Gaza City, 200 Hamas targets. And they're not done yet, far from it. All of these strikes could be building up to the most important operation, a ground invasion of Gaza. According to the Defense Minister of Israel, preparations are on. Listen to this.
We started the offensive from the air. Later on, we will also come from the ground. We've been controlling the area since day 2 and we are on the offensive. It will only intensify.
Yesterday we told you about Israel's unity government. Talks were on between the ruling coalition and the opposition. They are now in agreement, which means Israel will have an emergency unity government, and that's more insurance for Prime Minister Netanyahu, more political capital to escalate. He has that backing. So do not expect a let-up in this war. And what's the other side doing? Well, Hamas did launch some rocket attacks yesterday. They struck the southern city of Escalation in Israel. But the big picture is clear. Hamas cannot sustain this war. It is exactly how the Israeli Prime Minister put it. Hamas may have started the war, but now Israel will end it. The question is, at what cost? The situation in Gaza is getting worse. A total siege has been imposed there. No food, no fuel, no water. Gaza has just one power plant. Reports say it has stopped working, which means no electricity either. For hospitals, for shelters, and for refugee camps, no power. Israel has already asked Palestinians to flee Gaza. Just one problem though, they have nowhere to go. You can't go to the Israeli border. So the only option for them is the Egyptian side, the Rafah border crossing, which opens into Egypt. Now only 400 people are allowed to cross this border every day. And even that is tough now. The pictures can be heartbreaking, like this one. It shows a father comforting his daughters. Their bodies are covered in dust and blood. And this is the reality of war, the fallout of Hamas's barbaric and thoughtless attack.
Children are now playing with these. Where should they sleep? These are our mattresses, pillows. What is that? Where are we living? This is not a life. We are living surrounded by rubble. Gaza is destroyed. Everything is destroyed.
There are calls to create an evacuation corridor now, sort of like an exit route from Gaza. The United States is mediating this effort. Israel and Egypt are also involved, but time is of the essence here because the next stage could be worse, and Hamas knows this. If Israel throws its might at Gaza, it's game over for them. They cannot withstand it. So Hamas is now appealing for help, and they're asking Arab nations to join the fight.
I call upon the surrounding countries, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon and Egypt, all of its sons and daughters, officially and popularly, your duty is bigger because you are closer to Palestine.
Some have responded, like Syria and the Hezbollah in Lebanon. The Hezbollah have fired precision rockets into Israel in the north. They've also used anti-tank rounds, and in response, Israel is shelling southern Lebanon. It's a very volatile situation right now. At least 3 Israeli soldiers have been killed at the northern border. On the other side, around 8 Lebanese militants have been killed. Now, Israel and Hezbollah are sworn enemies. So if this war spills over, expect Hezbollah to join. And it's not just them. Israel is dealing with fire from Syria as well. Unidentified projectiles landed in Israeli territory, and in response, the Israelis fired back. So here's what Israel's war effort looks like right now. To the south, it's an all-out war. Israel versus Hamas. To the north, there is sporadic fighting against the Hezbollah in Lebanon and Syria. Plus, there is action in the West Bank. Palestinians are mobilizing and protesting there in the West Bank, and Israel is cracking down on them. Reports say around 21 Palestinians have been killed so far, so anything is possible. This single front war could turn into a 2-front or even a 3-front war. Israel and its allies know this. Yesterday, Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke to US President Joe Biden, and that phone call was on camera. Listen to what Netanyahu told Biden.
We had hundreds massacred, families wiped out in their beds and their homes, women brutally raped and murdered, over 100 kidnapped, including children. And since we last spoke, the extent of this evil, it's only gotten worse. They took dozens of children, bound them up, burned them, and executed them. They beheaded soldiers.
That was the brutality of Hamas's attack. Families killed in their beds, children abducted and executed, and soldiers beheaded. It was violence and brutality beyond imagination. President Biden realizes this. He's had his differences with Netanyahu in the past, but now he's supporting the Israeli leader.
In this moment, we must be crystal clear. We stand with Israel. We stand with Israel. And we will make sure Israel has what it needs to take care of its citizens, defend itself, and respond to this attack. There's no justification for terrorism. There's no excuse.
The U.S. military aid has already arrived in Israel. Aircraft carrier Gerald Ford is also in place. It is the largest carrier in the whole world, also the most advanced U.S. warship. There is now talk of sending a second carrier, the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. It was supposed to head towards Europe, but the Pentagon is considering a new plan to deploy this carrier to the eastern Mediterranean. And that's a lot of firepower. You see, these carriers do not sail alone. They sail as an armada. We're talking about cruisers, destroyers, fighter jets. So the message from Washington is quite clear. We have Israel's back. Netanyahu was likely waiting for this go-ahead. He's got everything in place to invade Gaza. Around 300,000 reserve soldiers are on standby, 3 lakh soldiers. Dozens of tanks and artillery vehicles are ready. It's either a grand invasion plan or a very good bluff. But considering what Israel has just been through, the invasion seems more likely. It will be costly, yes. It will be violent and brutal. But Netanyahu may not have an option. His intelligence failures have already boxed him in. He may see the invasion as redemption. Let's start our next story with some pictures. Pictures and videos that have gone viral. The first one is of a supposed Hamas attack. It was shared widely on social media. People called it an air assault on Israel. Turned out it was footage from a video game. The second video is this one. It's a video from TikTok. It shows paragliders crossing a boundary. Social media called it the visuals of the Hamas attack. Turned out the visuals were from Egypt, and they were shot sometime last year. But in the last few days, these pictures have been shared more than 900,000 times. The third video is of a rocket attack. It shows a salvo of rockets being fired. Social media claims these are Hamas rockets. They say the rockets are being fired at Tel Aviv. The video turned out to be an old one, and it wasn't even from Gaza. It was from Syria a few years ago. The fourth and last piece is from the world of football. And this one's been widely shared. Here is what it claims. Football superstar Ronaldo is holding a Palestinian flag, and he's showing solidarity with Palestine. The truth is, this isn't even Ronaldo. This is a photo of a Moroccan footballer. He's called Jawad El Yamik. And this is a photo from last year. It was taken during the 2022 World Cup. So I've shown you 4 examples. I could come up with many more, but you get the idea. Fake news is more rampant than bomb sirens in Israel and more damaging than the missiles landing on Gaza. This war is being fought on the digital battleground too. It is flush with misinformation, and this is not a first. It happened in 2021 during the Gaza war. It happened again in 2022 during the Ukraine war, and it still happens. And now we are seeing the same story play out in Israel, although on a much larger scale. Fake stories and photos are circulating on social media sites, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, X, you name it, and they have fake news. And the last one, X, seems to be particularly problematic. X was formerly known as Twitter. Elon Musk bought it last year. He renamed the platform. He fired half the staff. He also sold verified blue ticks for $8. And that is leading to a problem now. I'll explain why. While fake news on any platform is dangerous, it is especially so on Twitter. Because for a decade, Twitter had become the source of news for the world. Leaders made announcements here, government shared information here, verified accounts gave updates here. You trusted that blue check mark on Twitter. Twitter gave you access to real-time information anywhere in the world. It promoted posts of journalists and fact-checkers. But all of that has changed now. You can buy verification. And if you've paid money, it doesn't matter what you post. The platform will promote it. Also, Elon Musk has fired most of the fact-checking staff. So fake news abounds. It is dangerous in the best of times. It can be deadly during a war. Wrong pictures can be used to craft narratives, to inflame passions, and to misinform. So Europe has now issued a warning to Elon Musk. It's about the fake news spreading on X. The European Union wants Musk to respond in 24 hours. They say failure to comply with EU regulations will result in a fine. How much money are we talking about? Some 6% of X's annual revenue. Although this is not just about money, this is a much larger issue. Fake news spreads fast, faster than facts. Misinformation can travel across the globe in seconds, and social media platforms have a responsibility here to actively remove fake news. But I must say the responsibility does not end with them. It applies to all of us, to you and me. So think before you believe, verify before you share, before you hit that forward button. Because your actions have consequences, and when there's a war, those consequences are often grave. Remember, as technology evolves, so does the war for truth. It is up to each one of us, each and every one of us, to pursue that truth now. Do you know what's a kibbutz? I ask because you may have seen this word in many recent headlines. A kibbutz is a type of settlement that is unique to Israel. The word in Hebrew means gathering or cluster. Originally, it was like a farm. The first kibbutz was founded in the year 1910. The purpose was agriculture. But today, Israel has more than 270 such settlements, or kibbutzim. One of them is called Kfar Aza. It is in the news. It is located just 3 kilometers from Gaza. The residents here led a blissful life, but all of it changed last Saturday. Hamas terrorists stormed Kfar Aza. They carried out a massacre, among the worst that Israel has seen. Those who've survived are sharing tales of horror. Here's a report, and I must warn you, it can be disturbing. We advise viewer discretion.
A crushed crib lies outside a home. Burnt cars line the streets. Corpses lie everywhere, in the houses, on the roads, and some are wrapped in body bags. The stench of death follows you wherever you go. Just days ago, Kfar Aza was a sleepy kibbutz. Today, it's the scene of one of Israel's worst massacres.
And I want to say something. It's not a war. It's not a battlefield. You see the babies, the mother, the fathers in their bedrooms, in their protection rooms, and how the terrorists kill them. It's not a war. It's not a battlefield. It's a massacre. It's a terror activity.
The residents of this kibbutz lived a blissful life. They had gardens, swings, outside terraces. But Kfar Aza is located just 3 kilometers from Gaza. Their bliss was often interrupted by rocket attacks by Hamas. They were used to it. They accepted it as a price they had to pay for the country life. But none of them could have imagined what unfolded on Saturday. They didn't expect Hamas would breach their defenses and then kill so many people. Kfar Aza was one of the worst hit communities in Israel. On Saturday, Hamas stormed the kibbutz. The first line of defense was the kibbutz guards. These were residents with military experience. They usually patrolled the perimeter. Soon, Hamas killed all of them.
So there were rumors flying about that there were terrorists inside the kibbutz. A few hours later, it was clear that it was definite that there were terrorists inside the kibbutz. We heard shootings, and we were basically barricaded in for 21 hours until the army rescued us. We kept hearing shootings and gunfire and bombs and alarms, and just didn't know what was happening, just our worst nightmares.
Then they attacked the residents. Some were stuck in their safe rooms, others were killed. It all continued until the Israeli army came in. Even then, it was a fierce battle that went on for hours.
When the army came into our home, we didn't know that it was the army. We couldn't know. We just heard people coming into our house. They broke down the door and they went into the house and they started trying to pull the doors for the safe room out. And at that moment, I was sure that this is it.
Some of the bodies of Hamas terrorists still line the streets. They are yet to be removed. As for the death toll, Israel still doesn't have an official figure. We know that several residents have been killed, but no one knows exactly how many. Israeli soldiers are still searching the area for explosives.
Most of them were students with small families, 2 children, 1 children, or students. Average ages are between 18 to 25. And this neighborhood was brutally attacked and slaughtered.
Soldiers are still securing the streets of the kibbutz. You can hear explosions. Sirens warn residents of rockets. This was once a quaint and peaceful community. Today, charred houses and bodies line the streets of Kfar Aza. Its residents scarred for life. A sign that the kibbutz went through hell and back. A sign that life here will never be the same again.
We're still processing it. It's going to be a while, there's no going back from this. How can we go back to live in that beautiful place when we know what happened there and all the people that we knew, that we saw on the pavements every day going from the kindergarten and back? Then how can we just keep going on like nothing ever happened?
Hamas is brutal. They're terrorists who do not care about people, neither Palestinians nor Israelis. After Saturday, you would think there is agreement on that. Well, think again. People are lining up to support Hamas and to blame Israel for what has happened. They're blaming Israel for what it has suffered. Now, let's be clear about 2 things here. First of all, we sympathize with Palestine. They have become refugees in their own land. It is wrong. But whose fault is that? Was it the fault of the 260 youngsters who attended the Reem Music Festival? Was it the fault of the children in Kfar Aza? Was it the fault of the grandmother abducted from Be'eri? I don't think so. Killing innocent Israelis does not advance the Palestinian cause. It is not activism. It is bloodlust. And that's point number 1. Point number 2, Hamas is not Palestine. They are a terror group that rules over Gaza. The last elections in Gaza were held in 2006. It's been around 18 years. 18 years, no elections. You cannot call yourself a legitimate party, a legitimate government. If the Hamas is so popular, why not hold elections? Why not prove their popularity then? Let me tell you what an opinion poll found in July 2023. 62% Gazans wanted Hamas to uphold the ceasefire. 62% wanted the ceasefire. They did not want Hamas to start a war with Israel. And what did Hamas do? The exact opposite. The same poll revealed more interesting data. 50% Gazans wanted Hamas to stop demanding Israel's destruction. 70% wanted the Palestinian Authority to take over Gaza. The Palestinian Authority rules over West Bank. Most Gazans prefer them over the Hamas. So like I said, Hamas is not Palestine. And most of us understand this difference. Even major world powers do. Listen to the European Union's foreign policy chief.
The Palestinian Authority is our partner. We don't deal with Hamas, but yes, we support and we deal and we work together with the Palestinian Authority. And not all the Palestinian people are terrorists.
So it's as simple as it gets. But tell that to some so-called activists. A student organization at Harvard University has released a statement on Saturday's attack, and this is what they say. Today's events did not occur in a vacuum. The apartheid regime is the only one to blame here. They're talking about Israel. How about that? This is the message from America's elite university. 1,200 Israelis dead, but the whole thing is Israel's fault. It makes total sense. You also have pro-Palestinian rallies across the world. Nothing wrong with that. Everyone is free to organize rallies or protest. But look at what's happening at these events. In New York, people are holding up the swastika, the Nazi symbol. In Sydney, they're chanting anti-Semitic slogans. In London, Jewish eateries are being attacked. How is any of this helping Palestine? It isn't. But it exposes their true colors. By all means, protest against Israel if you want to, express solidarity with Palestine if you want to, but at the same time, condemn what happened on Saturday. What is wrong is wrong. You cannot justify that by pointing at the past. Some habitual offenders are openly supporting Hamas, like Iran and Hezbollah. Some mainstream politicians are doing so behind the scenes, like the liberal Democrats in America. You may know these faces: Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib. They're members of the US Congress. Neither of them has condemned the Hamas. Instead, they're asking the US to stop helping Israel. There is clear anti-Semitism at play here. Take Ilhan Omar, for example. In 2012, she accused Israel of hypnotizing the world. Now, to give you some context, hypnotism is linked to an offensive Jewish stereotype. In 2019, she did it again. She accused Israeli lobbies of using Benjamin's baby. Again, to give you some context, Benjamin's baby refers to $100 bills. And Omar was confronted about this. She said she was not aware of the stereotype around Jews and money. How believable. My point is a simple one. You can support Palestine without celebrating the murder of innocent people in Israel. But I guess that's too much to ask. Similar things are happening in India's neighborhood as well. Take a look at these pictures. In Pakistan, Israeli flags are being burnt. Some Pakistanis are praising the Hamas attack. They're calling it historic. Rallies were held in Bangladesh as well. Thousands marched with Palestinian flags. They demanded an end to Israeli airstrikes. Protests were also held in Muslim-majority Indonesia. And all of this is political support. Let's look at monetary support. Where does the financial help from Hamas come from? For Hamas come from? Where do they get their money? A number of places, like taxes, for example. That is one source of their income. Hamas collects tax on goods imported from Egypt. In 2021, this was worth $12 million per month. Iran also gives them a lot of money, around $100 million every year. Then you have Qatar. Their total financial assistance to Gaza stands at $1.8 billion. Their annual aid is $360 million. That's a lot of money. Do you know who handles this money? The Hamas does. There are reports of Hamas holding on to this money, of diverting these aid funds. This money was meant for Palestinians, for their progress, for their welfare. But who uses it? The Hamas does. So cutting off funds is a top priority because you need money to carry out the kind of attack they did on Saturday. You need money to fire thousands of rockets. Does that mean that aid should be totally cut off? That's not what we are saying. Most Palestinians, including in Gaza, live on aid. If you cut that off, people will starve to death. But blank checks should end. The aid should be delivered and monitored by global agencies. The likes of Hamas should not be able to touch that money. If not, the aid will never reach the people and the attacks will not stop. Now, we mentioned the supporters of Hamas, the likes of Qatar, Iran, the Hezbollah. But in the 1960s and 70s, this list included one more country. Do you know which country that was? Israel. I know it sounds surprising, but it is true. Many experts say Hamas is Israel's creation, and I'll explain why they say this. Gaza was not always under Hamas rule. Until 1966, Gaza was ruled by Egypt. Back then, there was no place for radical Islamists. Some of them were executed by Egypt. But in 1967, Gaza changed hands. The Arab-Israeli war was fought that year. Israel gained control of Gaza, and there they encountered a wheelchair-bound Islamist. His name was Sheikh Ahmed Yassin. He would go on to found the Hamas. But in 1967, Israel did not make much of this man. They thought he was just interested in running schools and hospitals, sort of like a charity worker. That's how they saw him. And they did like one thing about him. Sheikh Yassin hated the PLO. The PLO is the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and the PLO was a coalition. They officially represented the Palestinian people, and back then the PLO was led by this man, Yasser Arafat. Israel could not stand the PLO and Yasser Arafat. Their charter called for the destruction of Israel. They also carried out attacks and hijackings. So Israel wanted to weaken the PLO. Enter Sheikh Yassin. He too could not stand the PLO, but his reasons were very different. While Arafat claimed to be secular and nationalist, Yassin was not. He was an Islamist. So the classic equation was at play here. Your enemy's enemy is your friend. And so Israel helped Yassin and company. What happened next is detailed by a former Israeli official. Yassin had created a group called Mujama. Israel recognized it. They recognized that group, and that too as a charitable group. They also allowed him to create the Islamic University of Gaza. Today, it is considered a hotbed of radicalism. In fact, Israel attacked the same university today. They called it an important Hamas military center. So when did Israel realize its mistake? When it was too late. In 1984, Israel arrested Yassin. He was found storing weapons. That should have been a red flag, but Israel ignored it. They considered him to be the lesser threat. So the next year, Yassin walked out of jail. And in 1987, he formed Hamas. The setting was perfect for him because 1987 was also when the first Intifada started. That's a major Palestinian uprising. He used those sentiments to try and gain popularity, and by the 1990s, he succeeded. The PLO had signed deals with Israel. They tweaked their charter to recognize the country of Israel. They also dropped the demand for Israel's destruction. Now, some Palestinians were not happy with all of this. They said the PLO was going soft on Israel. And who quoted these people? The Hamas did. By then, Hamas was organizing attacks on Israel, killing Israeli soldiers. Many former officials have expressed regret for this. One Israeli commander admitted to funding Hamas himself. Imagine that. Israeli taxpayers giving money to Hamas. It was a gross miscalculation, one that is now costing Israel. Yassin himself was killed in 2004 in an Israeli airstrike, but his organization was very strong by then. Hamas came to dominate the Gaza Strip, and in 2007, they took total control. We've talked about Israel's intelligence failures leading up to Saturday's attack. We could say Hamas too is one such mistake, a grave error of strategic judgment. Israel is not alone though. Many countries have made such mistakes, like the Taliban and the US, Pakistan and the Tehreek-e-Taliban. And it's a lesson for governments around the world. You cannot control or leverage radicals, because in the end, you will pay. We've told you about the war, we've told you about the death toll, we've also told you about the citizens. But what about the foreigners that are stuck in Israel? What happens to them now? Can they still leave? Well, for now, most airlines have cancelled their flights to Israel. This includes the likes of Virgin Atlantic, Air France, Lufthansa, Emirates, United Airlines, Delta Airlines, and American Airlines. Basically, a third of all flights to Tel Aviv have been cancelled. The ones that are flying are full of two kinds of people, journalists and reservists.
I think we were very well prepared in the army after 3 years of military service. I saw a lot of stuff. I think I'm ready for war. God is with us and everything will be fine.
So the reservists are flying back into the country. They want to fight the war that Israel is now fighting. But foreigners want out. And many of them are pleading for help. Their home countries have responded. They're scrambling to rescue their citizens, aka evacuations. Canada has about 1,000 citizens in Israel. It's a very small number, and Canada is sending its military aircraft to rescue them. Then there are about 4,500 Germans in Israel. They too will be evacuated. Hungary evacuated some 215 people. Albania has rescued 40 of its nationals. Mexico is flying 300 of its citizens back home. 192 South Koreans have flown out of Tel Aviv. More citizens are expected to be evacuated in the coming days.
We were on the beach at first. Then we had to hide, run as fast as possible. Then at the hotel, we were caught by sirens and an attack again and had to shelter in a bunker.
But not all countries plan to evacuate citizens. And this list, the second list, includes the likes of the UK and the United States. Now, there is no exact number of how many American citizens live in Israel. In 2021, the figure was around 200,000. That's around 2.2% of the Israeli population, Americans. 14 of them have been killed by Hamas in Saturday's attack. Several others have been taken hostage. The UK too has more than 60,000 British nationals in Israel and Gaza. More than 10 of them are dead. A bigger number, we are told, has been taken hostage. Now, these countries, the US and the UK, are usually the first ones to issue advisories and to evacuate their people. But in this case, they have not announced any emergency operations, perhaps in a show of solidarity with Israel. Same with India, no evacuations yet. India has about 18,000 citizens in Israel. That's a small number, and these are primarily caregivers, students and workers. There are no plans to evacuate them yet. But the government of India has issued an advisory. If you are in Israel, the advice is to stay vigilant. Plus, there is a 24/7 emergency helpline. We will flash the number on the screen. This is the number you can contact if you need assistance. If you're an Indian, you need assistance in Israel, call this number. Meanwhile, several foreign nationals are also being held captive by Hamas. There are no details of their whereabouts. Most of them are believed to be in Gaza. Their families have lost contact with them. Some have identified relatives from videos on social media. Others are still waiting for concrete information. But right now, their governments do not know very much. So the situation is still tense and volatile, and it will impact the whole world in more ways than one. Remember, we are talking about an escalating conflict in West Asia. Even though Israel is not an oil-producing or oil-supplying country, this conflict is spilling over, and it will have a direct bearing on the oil market. Right after the attack on Saturday, oil prices surged about 4%. It has since shrugged off those gains. Gold prices too have gone up by 1%, but generally market reaction has been muted. And that said, industry experts are still on the edge. That's because no one knows how long this war will go on or what shape it will take. Will there be an oil supply disruption or a wider conflict in West Asia? Vantage continues after a short break.
It also released video of drones it says it used for border surveillance. The final part involved moving hostages to Gaza, mostly achieved early in the attack, a source close to Hamas said. In one well-publicized hostage-taking, fighters abducted partygoers fleeing a rave near the kibbutz of Re'im near Gaza. One analyst told Reuters that Hamas probably succeeded beyond their expectation, but now they'll have to, quote, deal with an Israel determined to decimate them.
One of the biggest challenges for Israel right now is ensuring the safety of hostages. Hamas has taken some 100 Israeli citizens and some foreigners. It's a harrowing time for their families. They're putting pressure on the government to ensure their release. And Hamas knows this. They're releasing videos on social media, videos that show Israelis in captivity. We've been talking to many such families who are awaiting news of their loved ones. Needless to say, they're in shock, unable to articulate their anguish. Here's what they told us.
This is Moran. She is an Israeli woman, an animal lover. She designs jewelry. For weeks, she was looking forward to the Supernova Festival, the music festival held in southern Israel last Saturday. She was excited to attend it, and she was setting up her jewelry stall there. Her family was proud, but on the day of the festival, the excitement vanished. While she was there, things took a cruel turn. Around 8:30 a.m., Moran called her mother. She said she and her friends were being shot at. They were running to save themselves. That was the last time Moran's mother spoke to her. The next time her mother saw her, she was in a TikTok video. She was in captivity. She was kidnapped by Hamas.
It doesn't leave you. The fact that Moran is somewhere, we don't know what's going on with her. It doesn't sound good. We know that she was kidnapped.
Yeah, we know that she was kidnapped. She's being held.
It's frightening. To see his parents, that devastated. To see our parents is heartbreaking.
My parents are devastated from all this event. Me and my friends and family, we still holding on together. We still have faith that she's alive. We want her to come back home.
Supernova was like any other music festival. About 4,000 young people had gathered. They were dancing at dawn. But above their heads, black clouds were gathering. Perhaps an indication of what was to come. In the hours that followed, Hamas fired thousands of rockets into Israel, and armed terrorists stormed the festival, which quickly turned into a massacre. This became one of the first and worst hit zones. The slaughter was captured on camera. 260 people were killed at the festival and lost their lives. Not just that, when the festival became a war zone, many people were taken hostage, including Moran. And for her and about 140 others, the nightmare continues. One of the most harrowing videos to emerge is that of Noa Argamani. She was attending the festival, but during the attack, she was abducted by Hamas. She was seen being bundled onto the back of a motorcycle. She was crying and screaming, reaching out to her partner, but all he could do was watch. Both are still in captivity.
What can I say? My whole life since she was born, I have done my best to protect and to hug her and to support and love her. And now in this difficult moment, to at least encourage her. I couldn't say anything to tell her something. Noah, cheer up. I saw her boyfriend crying. What difficult days. Difficult days.
The helplessness is pervasive and the grief is overwhelming. What do you do when your children, your loved ones, are taken away by terrorists? Parents of the abducted Israelis are desperate. They're pleading for information, much like Moran's family.
Time goes by, day by day, with no more information. We just we stop finding any more clues. We don't know what's happening. We're just hoping. We're just asking people to help. That's what we're doing with her. We want her back home.
And Yuri David, whose daughters were abducted by Hamas.
Talking to them on the phone, I told them, lay down with your face to the ground, with your faces one next to the other, hold your hands together, don't even breathe, stop breathing. It was not easy. It was something like 30 minutes that I was with them on the phone, until I heard 4 breaths like that, and after that, she didn't answer me anymore. I'm asking for the whole world to see what I'm going through.
So far, of about 150 hostages, most are civilians. Hamas has threatened to execute them one by one and videotape the killings. Each time an Israeli airstrike hits Gazans in their homes, this cruelty is unprecedented, and it's become Israel's biggest dilemma.
It took also a while to Israel to know who is hostage and who is not. Most of the people that kidnapped, we know it through the social media. I mean, Hamas took videos of everything they did and they posted it. That's how us and all over Israel, we knew who is hostage and who is not, because we saw how they kidnapped us.
The country has not openly declared a plan to rescue the hostages yet, but it claims to have identified most of those abducted. It's begun notifying the families. The fate of the hostages is still unclear. In the meantime, Israeli families have created their own informal groups. They are publicizing details about their abducted relatives and asking for international help.
We really need international help. We really need international help in order to bring Moran home. We really need help in order to make it as important for the leaders as it is for us, because she's worth it.
These distraught families are living on a prayer and the hope that they will get to see their sons, daughters and siblings once again.
The streets of Tel Aviv wear a deserted look. The normally bustling city has been quiet since Saturday. That's because rockets from Gaza reached here and it's not over yet. Every once in a while you hear an explosion nearby. Air raid sirens start ringing. People rush to take shelter. It's become a way of life, and for Israel, it's not really a new story. This is arguably the global capital of bomb shelters. The government mandates the construction of such safe havens across the country. Israel spends a lot of money on building shelters and bunkers. They're placed strategically so that people have quick access to them, because the difference between life and death here can be a few seconds. Earlier today, we went to one of these bunkers in Tel Aviv, and here's what we found.
Since Saturday, Israel has been a war zone. Sirens sound regularly across most cities. The alarms are a signal. They tell people to get off the streets and take refuge in shelters like this one.
If you're, for instance, in a border village, then you have 15 seconds to rush to a shelter and to go to safety. If you're in Jerusalem, which is away from the border, then you have 1 minute and 42 seconds. So this is how they've mapped the entire country and people's access to shelters like these.
Residential, communal and institutional shelters can differ quite a bit. Every residence must have a shelter or security room. They usually have reinforced concrete walls and ceilings. The floors should be 20 to 30 centimeters thick. The doors made of steel. Windows, if any, should be shatterproof. The safe rooms are to protect against a variety of assaults, rockets, shrapnel, gunfire, and even chemical attacks. Even the smaller residential shelters should be able to withstand all of these attacks. However, communal and institutional shelters are usually better for defense. That's why many people have chosen to live in the bigger shelters since Saturday.
We're staying here in shelter for a few days from Saturday, and we're sleeping here with the kids, the families here. We're all in a big anxiety, so we're staying here and hoping for the best.
The communal and institutional shelters are also located at key junctions, places where people can get to within seconds. The public shelters are better equipped than the residential ones. The goal of a residential shelter is to weather out a small, sudden attack. They aren't meant for long-term refuge. Many don't have toilets and rations are limited. Communal and institutional shelters are more suited for longer sanctuary.
This one is a public shelter. It is very well equipped, as you can see. There is proper air conditioning. This is a big AC. This is some equipment that we are told that purifies the air in the event of a chemical attack. And if too many people are gathered here, the capacity of this shelter, we're told, is 200 people. So when all these people are here underground, then you need air purification, and they have a mechanism for that. They also have a Wi-Fi installed here, an emergency light, so all the basic necessities are taken care of. And this is the second floor of the shelter. Above this, you have public utilities, you have washrooms, so people can come here, and this is a residential area. This is underneath a school, we understand. So a lot of people living here. This is in central Tel Aviv, and shelters like these, at least 240 such shelters have been built in this city alone.
The 240 shelters in Tel Aviv have seen high footfalls this week. They've also seen a spirit of defiance and of hope.
While people head to bomb shelters, Israel's high-tech defense mechanism kicks into action, aka the Iron Dome. Now, the name is symbolic. It is not an actual dome or an umbrella or anything of the sort. The Iron Dome is Israel's homegrown missile defense system. It was reportedly conceived in the year 2005 and rapidly developed after the 2006 war, the war between Israel and Hezbollah in 2006. Back then, thousands of rockets were launched at Israel from Lebanon, and they caused massive damage to Israeli infrastructure. So Israeli firms began working full steam on the Iron Dome with some help from the US. And by the year 2011, the first battery was deployed. Today, there are 10 Iron Dome systems protecting Israel. Our next report tells you how they work.
The Iron Dome, Israel's force field, Tel Aviv's all-weather rocket propulsion system. A system that Hamas breached on Saturday. A lot has been said about the Iron Dome, about its successes and recent failures. We'll get to that too. But before that, do you know how it actually works? The visuals you're seeing right now are of just 1/3 of the Iron Dome. This is the missile battery. It's stage 3 of the Iron Dome's defensive operation. To understand how the system works, let's look at the big picture. Whenever a rocket or missile or even a drone is launched at Israel, the first step to counter it is, of course, detection. The incoming aerial threat is identified and tracked by stage 1 of the Iron Dome, the detection and tracking radar, the ELM-2084. This is a 3D ASA MMR. For those not fluent in military speak, 3D here means three-dimensional radar, ASA stands for Active Electronically Scanned Array, and MMR means Multi-Mission Radar. The important thing to know about the ELM-2084 is that it is state-of-the-art. It detects even the smallest projectiles over a large range. It can detect, identify, and then follow the incoming threats. Not just that, it also keeps a track of Israel's own missiles, so that the Iron Dome doesn't accidentally target Israeli weapons. So effectively, stage 1 of the Iron Dome is this radar, which works as its eyes. Stage 2 is its brain, the Iron Dome's battle management control. From the outside, it looks like a shed, but this shed houses serious computational power. The battle management system processes the information being sent by the radar. It calculates the trajectory of the incoming projectiles. It sees where the strike will take place, and then it makes a judgment call. It chooses which incoming projectiles to target and which to ignore. And it sends this information to stage 3 of the Iron Dome, the missile battery. An Iron Dome battery contains 3 or 4 missile launchers. Look at this launcher up close. Do you see the X marks? 5 columns and 4 rows of them. Behind them are the missiles. Each launcher contains 20 Tamir interceptor missiles. Tamir means tall in Hebrew. Interceptor is self-explanatory. These missiles have a range of between 4 to 70 kilometers. They're fired at the incoming projectiles, and the interceptors then live up to their name. They take out the target and protect those below. We mentioned that the interceptors have a range of about 70 kilometers. This is in all directions from the missile battery. Using your high school geometry, you can see how this forms a half sphere of defense, a defensive dome centered at the battery. The Iron Dome system has been in service since 2011. That's when the first battery was set up. By now, Israel has 10 in total. The plan was to put up 15 batteries, but that was before this week's events. Now, who knows how many Iron Domes will be set up? You see, for all that's been said about its failure this week, the Iron Dome is still an excellent system. It has a 90% success rate while taking down enemy projectiles. This time, it just got overwhelmed. There were too many incoming rockets and not enough interceptors to bring them all down. That doesn't mean the Iron Dome failed. The 10 batteries did all they could. Israel just needs more batteries. Now, the Iron Dome isn't cheap. Back in 2013, it cost about $50 million to set up one battery. With upgrades and inflation, it'll cost more now. But it's needed now more than ever. Saturday's attack has changed the face of West Asia. Israel will need to set up more Iron Domes to keep its civilians safe in the months to come.
So here's where we are. It's day 5 of the war between Israel and Hamas. Here in Tel Aviv, we've heard sirens going on and off in the day. And like any other conflict, it is the children who are suffering the most in this one too, no matter which side they're on. So before we leave you today, here are some images that show the devastating toll on the young caught in this conflict. That's all we have for you on this episode of Vantage. Make sure you tune in tomorrow. We will bring you more updates from Ground Zero. Thanks for watching.
לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה יתברך שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן.
يعتبرون جزرة من رعيم باتجاه قطاع غزة. ها هم جنودنا الذين أثخنوا في عدونا.
Namaste, Jai Hind, and welcome to this edition of The Right Stand. Let's start up with a big thumbs up from the International Monetary Fund for Modinomics, the IMF raising India's GDP growth forecast for the financial year 23-24 to 6.3%, its second upward revision since April report. IMF has actually attributed stronger than expected consumption during the April to June for this entire upward projection of growth in their estimates. Now, net direct tax collections have also exceeded 9.57 lakh crore, marking a 21.82% increase compared to the previous year. The Central Board of Direct Taxes, CBDT, has said around 70% of the individual taxpayers have shifted to the exemption-less personal income tax regime. The World Bank has also hailed Bharat, saying that the global economy is getting weaker, but Bharat and the US are bright spots. The World Bank hailing good economic management positive for India and saying that in the last 10 years, Bharat has made a huge push on infrastructure and technological aspects, which has seen a lot of innovation. 1 crore OPD tokens have now been generated using Aabha-based scan and share service within 1 year of its implementation. Uttar Pradesh, Karnataka, Jammu and Kashmir emerging as the top performing states in implementation of this digital OPD registration service to patients. The National Health Authority also looking to create more use cases like scan and share to assist citizens in accessing healthcare services and also leveraging technology. Ladies and gentlemen, these are the bright spots for Bharat, but there are concerns all around. Right at the top of this edition, this midweek edition of The Right Stand, we begin with a person who stood solid, strong, robust against the Taliban, against terrorism, has been unabashed at it, and he's somebody who's waiting to get back to his homeland. Nearly 2 years in exile, Amrullah Saleh with his first interview to a news network ever since the regime change in Afghanistan. He's stood steadfast in his not just love for Afghanistan, but also his innate hatred for terrorism. Afghanistan's acting president in exile, Amrullah Saleh, speaking to the News 18 network, to CNN News 18, exclusively from an undisclosed location. This is Mr. Saleh's first ever interview in almost 2 years to any media publication around the world. And that's why it's a world exclusive, ladies and gentlemen. In its first interview post his exile, where